Today is November 14th. It's currently 11 in the morning. And for those of you who are very good at observing shit, I did miss a day to upload a video, which kind of sucks, but I missed it for a good reason. It's 11 in the fucking morning. I'm not filming at like 4 in the morning. My sleep schedule is like low-key kind of fixed. I had way too big of a dinner last night. And then I like sat on my chair. It was like 7 p.m. Or no, what was it? It was like I ate my dinner and then I came back in my chair. I don't remember what time exactly it was, but I was like, man, I am tired. And so I just knocked out for like 6 hours. And I woke up at like 3 in the morning. I'm like, oh shit. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I went to go brush my teeth. I went back to bed. I slept for like 2 hours. I woke up at like 5 in the morning. And I'm like, you know what? Now my day started. So now my sleep schedule's fixed. Like we're kind of normal again, which is amazing. I feel so good. I got so much work done this morning. I was able to work on this video for like the whole day, which by the way, this video, we are going to be talking about the EDM vertical, how to play around the different EDM units, how to play around the different headliners, etc. But before we start this video, I do want to talk about this real quick because I think it's very, very important for you to know. Leduck, if for somehow you missed it, because for whatever reason, every time Leduck posts a video, it's a banger. But on top of that, this dude, he just doesn't miss. Like 30,000 views in the past 5 days, like bro's killing it. But he has some very, very good resources talking about how the EDM trait works, how to play around the mechanics, specifically within the EDM trait. So I highly recommend going to his channel and watching these before you watch this video in case you haven't already, because I will link these below. And again, you should know how this trait works before we actually dive into how to play around these traits, because the assumption is that you already know how this shit works. I will say one thing though, is that there are two things I think Leduck didn't mention at all that I think are kind of important. The first one is that Trickster's Glass does not work with EDM. It's like kind of implied throughout the video that the duplicate copies don't get sampled as well. But just to be clear, Trickster's Glass also does not work with EDM. So even though the original unit that is holding Trickster's Glass is going to, you know, get sampled, the actual Trickster Glass unit will not become sampled, if that makes sense. Another thing to note as well is that he doesn't actually talk about the timers for EDM as well, and I think this is really important to mention. The timers for EDM, I'm just gonna put it on screen right now, so this is just easier for you to see. I wrote it on my notepad. But the EDM timers, at least at the time of recording this video, is that if you have 5 EDM, which is important, we'll talk about 5 and why that's like the crucial number. But 5 EDM, 22 seconds, your sample units will get sampled, right? Then it's 15, then at 8 seconds, and then at 0. So imagine the fight starts at 30, right? And then the first 8 seconds, it'll flip, sample, and then after 7 seconds, because it's at 15, it'll flip, sample, and then at 8 seconds again, it'll flip, sample, and then at the very end, it'll flip. So 4 times. It gets sampled 4 times. 4 and 3 basically get sampled 3 times before the OT timer hits. It's technically 2 and then 3, but it's like -1 second, so it's really not that different. For EDM, again, it's based off the timer of the clock at the top. So once it hits 21, it'll sample. 13, it'll sample. 5, it'll sample at 4 EDM. And at 3 EDM. At 20, it'll sample. At 11, it'll sample. And then once OT starts, it'll sample again. But, again, we'll talk about the why 5 EDM is kind of like the only one you ever really want to play in the first place. But more on that later. So, without further ado, let's quickly go over the units within this vertical tree, which are Lux, Zed, Zack, and Jax. Now, I'm going to assume, again, you've watched the Leduck video, so you already know how the trait works and everything, so I'm not going to go over that. But if you're unfamiliar with the units, or you just need a bit of a refresher, Zack is our main 4-cost tank, who is a bruiser. Jax is our 2-cost, who is a mosher. Zed, who is our crowd diver, and Lux, who is our dazzler. Zed is the premier carry. Lux is also the, I guess, other premier carry, because you never really play them dual carry. And let's just start talking about the different units, shall we? Because there's not too much to cover. But now let's hop into our first headliner, our first unit of the EDM vertical, which is going to be Jax. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't feel the most comfortable being like, hey, like, you should play this board, because I don't think it's good. Like, dead ass, I just don't think it's good. Theoretically speaking, you should be playing within vertical moshers, right? The idea is that, like, you hit Jax 3 and you just push into moshers, and ideally that should be able to tempo you into, like, a fast 9. That is, like, the ideal scenario. But the problem is that when you play in, like, 3-star Jax, you're typically, it's a 2-cost reroll, by the way. It's a 2-cost reroll, duh. But it's a 2-cost reroll, and for those of you who don't know about the tempo of 2-cost rerolls, is that normally you're hitting at 4-2. 4-2 in this set feels like you are a Jax 3 with, like, not as much econ. Like, ideally you hit within tempo, but you probably won't have that much econ left over. And then you're fighting into people who have most likely fast 8. At 4-2, maybe even at 4-5, which is pretty standard nowadays. So you're playing into like level 8 boards. So you're kind of stuck playing this Jax 3 versus boards that have like 2-star Caitlyn's, 2-star Ezreal's, 2-star Ari's, right? You're playing against a lot stronger quality units, and it's just that I just don't see how this unit can really succeed compared to just playing standard. So that's why I just don't think it's that great, at least in higher elo, but maybe in lower elo it might be okay because the tempo lobby may be a bit slower. Also, keep in mind in terms of itemization, we have Ginsu BT Titans here at the moment, even though yes, Jax does scale off AP, but I will say I don't think that this is actually correct, even though I think it's sort of the default build that everybody's been running right now, or at least from what I've seen. The default build, in my opinion, is actually JG Hodge QSS. I think this makes way more sense, in my opinion, but you could also do like QSS Titans Hodge, for example, and that's probably fine, or like maybe Archangels for scaling damage. I don't really know. Again, I just don't really see how this Jax unit can really be much of a threat compared to other meta boards. But again, it's just something that you could consider playing if you happen to have the line for it, but I would not expect many great things out of it. Just so you know, real quick, the headliner effect, because somebody did ask me in a couple videos ago to mention all of them, so I feel like it's my duty. I have to. But it's just 200 HP and 20 extra AP. It's not like substantial in any means. Finally, before we move on to the next unit, because there's one last thing I do want to mention, is that reroll is actually getting nerfed a bit harder, like an hour ago. For those of you who don't know, the patch notes came out for one of the last bigger changes for the rest of the PvE, and there's actually a pretty large system change here that I'll read to you guys. It's right at the top. Any champion with less than half of its copies left in the pool, 10, 9, 8, 4, 4, which are the halfway breakpoints, copies or less, cannot appear as headliners. So before, see, like right now, we had a bit of a problem in higher elo where, or not higher elo, but I guess in general, is that there's this bit of an optimization that's going on right now where you want to play around your 3-star 4 cost by getting 6 copies of the unit, and then you just find the headliner, and then you're chilling. It was like very easy to find 3-star 4 cost, and it was a lot easier actually during the beginning of the PvE to hit 3-star 5 cost. Obviously, that would never really be a problem in higher elo because it's really hard to get to that point. But versus like 3-star 4 cost though, it was like way too easy. So there was a bit of a problem. So they're trying to combat that problem. But I'm gonna bring it back up on the screen because I don't know why I moved it away. But the biggest change that is bothering me is that this also affects 1 cost, 2 costs, and 3 costs. So it's going to be a little harder to use that mechanic to try and 3-star your headliners, or 3-star your 2 costs and 3 costs. So keep that in mind if you're trying to use your headliner to try and find the 3-cost copy of a unit. It's something that is definitely affecting reroll a little bit. I just don't know how substantial that change is going to be compared to before. But anyways, moving on to Lux. Now, Lux is sort of the interesting one. If you watched the leduck video, you probably saw him already testing this shit out. But the idea is that you are just like at a rave and like you're just shooting lasers fucking everywhere. I'd assume that's what a rave does. I've never actually been to one. But basically the idea is simple. You just sample the Lux. You get the headliner bonus, which by the way, you might notice the itemization is kind of interesting here. But you get the headliner bonus onto Lux, and she just beams the shit out of everything. And it's actually pretty cool. It's actually a really fun trade. Obviously you reroll at 7. The idea is that I think you just play 3 out of 4 Dazzler, to be completely honest, if you find the Twisted Fate. But you can also just play like 4 Disco or whatever, just whatever is easiest. You could also even do like 4 Dazzler. But then instead what you do is that you just drop the Z and you just play 4 EDM. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but this probably makes just as much sense. It just depends on what you find, right? And then just set on 8, you get 5 EDM, and then you are just beaming the shit at everything. I don't know if 3 out of 4 Dazzler is better in keeping 5 EDM versus 4 EDM with 4 Dazzler. My guess is that I actually think 5 EDM might be better than having 4 Dazzler on level 7. That's what I think, because I think getting those casts in sooner is really, really substantial. But maybe 4 Dazzler is just better and you just stick with 4 EDM. I mean, this would make logically the most sense, but maybe it isn't. Who knows? Let me talk about the headliner effect real quick, because it actually affects the way that we itemize our Lux unit. Lux, Guardbreaker, Hodge, Blue Buff is what, in my opinion, is probably going to be BIS. Reason being is that her headliner effect, and this is one of the few headliner effects that I actually think are substantial, she can now crit with her ability. Her headliner effect is JG, which is like, wow. You know, like, damn. They're giving her JG for free. So that's actually kind of insane. So you really want Headliner Lux if you're going to play this Lux reroll variation, because the fact that her ability can crit when you have the Headliner effect versus can't crit, That's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. So I definitely recommend the Guardbreaker Hodge. You just want to maximize the crit, and then the blue buff, obviously, just so that you can cast more and more. Really, really fun board to play. I highly recommend trying it out. This is definitely like I want to say like an S- tier board. Under the right circumstances, it can do a lot. And if you get to cap out, you will have like an insanely good time. Moving on, Z sample. Now the Z sample is pretty interesting. This is what I believe is going to be the most quote-unquote meta way to approach playing Z reroll, or not Z reroll, sorry, but the Z headliner. The idea is that obviously 5 EDM, and you want 5 EDM all the time because, again, like we talked about before, you want everything to be casting immediately. But Country surprisingly fits really well within this EDM vertical, because you have the Bruiser with Tahm Kench, then you have the Masha with Urgot and Jax, and then you get the Crowd Diver with Katarina and Zed. And I feel like the main line for this is going to be 5 EDM for Crowd Diver. I believe. They actually buffed the crap out of 4 Crowd Diver today. Again, they're really trying to get the Zed unit to work before the set goes live. And I don't know if this is enough to get it online. There is a bit of an argument to be made that instead of playing 4 Crowd Diver, you could actually play 2 Sentinel. The idea being is that you're just making the Zed a bit more tankier. You're just trying to buff the Zed in any way, shape, or form. And you just play 2 Sentinel, and then this way, even though you only have 2 Crowd Diver, your Zed is still going to be able to put in the work to be able to clean. I don't think there's that much of a difference between 2 Crowd Diver and 4 Crowd Diver, but maybe there is after these buffs, because they buff 4 and they buff 6, I believe. So yeah, maybe 4 Crowd Diver is the way to go, but if not, then maybe this is fine. This felt fine to me, to be completely honest, but that is just my opinion. Again, I would say try it out, but I don't know how it's going to feel after the patch. Maybe it is for Crowd Diver nowadays, but maybe you just stick to 2 and then 2 Sentinels or just 2 Legendaries. It really depends. There's also a very high capped out version of this board, by the way, this is like hard to hit. Like, what the fuck? There's 3 5 costs on this board, 2 4 costs. That's a lot. That's very expensive. Basically, you have the Kiana, you have the Jax. It's just a really hard time to get, you know, Yorick, Kiana, Alawi all online, Zac 2, Zed 2, all on 8. And then you have to find a Kennen somewhere because it just makes sense within the tree. The idea is that you get Masha from Jax and Yorick, and then Yorick is a Guardian, so Kennen's works with true damage for Kiana. So yeah, I mean, if you get this entire thing online, it's a super strong fucking level 8 board. But this is like one of those boards you wouldn't really expect to hit until 9. And then if you're going 9, you're just teching the Dazzler, you're just teching Ziggs, and you're having a really, really crazy time. Again, very capped out version of the board. If you're one of those people who, by the way, are like, hey, I hit Kiana too because I'm running Birthday Present, or I just found the Kiana Headlighter at 9, I don't know how to play around it. This is how you play around it. So you can definitely play around Kiana for certain. But if you find the Headliner Zed as well, and you're like, hey, I gotta run this, I don't have that much money to work with, now you know how to play around the board. But very, very fun board, and let me know how this is, because I haven't tried out this like super capped out version. Obviously, if you're hitting this board, you should definitely like be in a very good spot. But maybe like the 4 Crowd Diver version, let me know how it goes. Or if you're tempoing with Country in the early game, let me know how it goes. Because again, one man show over here. We're doing our best over here. And then before we move on to the last one, I just want to talk about real quick Zed's Headliner effect, 100 extra HP, and his shadows gain 10% attack speed and 10% AD. Not that much to talk about. Finally, let's talk about Zac sample, which is probably going to be the most prominent version of 5 EDM, which is sort of, I believe Reddit's called it Bounce House. I think it's a cool name. But the idea is very simple. This is the core of Bounce House. The idea being is that Zac, you have 5 EDM. You have all the EDM units plus Alawi. Very, very simple. Very straightforward. And you can actually just flex whatever the fuck you want. It's actually insane how much frontline you get with this, because basically Zac is obviously very, very tanky. Right, one of the tankiest forecasts that we have, with the exception of like Blitzcrank, right? Very tanky unit, but then everything else is turning into Zac and then bouncing this shit around, right? It's actually really cool to watch. But you just have like this shitload of CC, so your frontline actually lasts for like a relatively long time. And then this basically, you can think of all your EDM units as if they're like frontline units, right? And then you just flex anything in the backline. It does not matter. I think one of the more common lines is going to be the Twisted Fate line. Shout out to Dora Waza who taught me this one. But basically Twisted Fate in the backline here, you get the 2 Dazzler. Yorick is just here because Yorick Thresh just makes a lot of sense. This is a bunch of frontline, but not that much damage, you could theoretically, and I don't know if you noticed here, but Zed actually had some items here. You could theoretically think of Zed as a secondary carry. The idea being is that because Zed's gonna basically turn into like the bouncy house as well. He's gonna turn into a Zac. Except the thing is that because Zac's ability is going to scale off of Zed's items when he transforms, now the IE is going to put in the work, and you're going to be able to crit with the Zed spell, and then you can actually deal like a decent amount of damage. Obviously, Zed will cast on his own as well, and he doesn't dish out a lot, but he dishes out enough that you're like, okay, like I'm content with that for a secondary carry. Obviously, Twisted Fate's going to be your main carry here. Shojin, JG, Guardbreaker, I think is going to be this. I don't know though. I mean, there's an argument for Archangels as well. That makes sense, like Archangels and GS. I think this is fine as well. The idea though is that you don't really want attack speed on TF. I think, according to people in my chat and a couple other people as well that I've talked to, the idea is Twisted Fate doesn't really give too much of a shit about attack speed. He's actually just more of a caster. He sounds like an attack speed unit, but he's just more of a caster. So yeah, you kind of just want AP and like caster items. So I guess that's just the way that it goes. But nonetheless, this is still a very, very solid board. I saw Dorwaza play this earlier today, and or I guess this was yesterday now, but he played it and it looked very, very solid. So I highly recommend trying it out. There is also the like big shot version, which is basically it's just EDM plus big shot. Bard is just in here because he just makes the most sense because it gives you Jazz and Dazzler, but this is basically like the frontline EDM plus big shot. It's very, very simple, and then just Bard fits in so beautifully. He just, you know, caps it out very nicely. It looks nice. It looks pretty. And then finally, obviously, we gotta talk about Zac's headliner effect, which is 150 HP and 10 AP. And I mean, it's not much to talk about. Like, it is what it is. Oh, I do want to mention this though. This EDM trait has a really, 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 really strong synergy with the Crown Guarded Augment. Basically, you just slam infinite Crown Guards on all your units. And basically, because they all transform into Zac. This is assuming you're sampling your Zac, right? You sample your Zac, and then you just have infinite Crown Guards, and all those Crown Guards are going to scale off of the AP from the items that these units are holding. You probably don't want Crown Guard on Zed. You could do like Alalia or whatever, but Jax is fine. You could do it even on like Lux is like okay, I guess. But like the idea is that Crown Guard is just so good. I guess you could do this even if you really wanted to. But it's so good. It's so good. You get so much value out of it. I highly recommend it. So anyways, that'll basically do it for this video. Hope you guys learned something, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another video. And until then, I will see you guys all later. I hope this was helpful, and take care. Happy climbing.